We're going to start on 1 point perspective, and for this first part, we're going to just draw blank buildings, okay? The end result will hopefully have detail, and the blank buildings will be filled in with detail. This was done by a high schooler, but so if this is the junior high class, don't worry. We'll make it easier. But I want you to wait on the details because for this first week, we're going to just do the bones of the drawing. And then next week, we'll use the same piece of paper with our outlines on it, and we'll work on putting in the detail. So let's not do the detail this week. We're going to do just the outlines. Okay. I want to talk just briefly about 1 point perspective. 1 point perspective, sorry about the glare on that. 1 point perspective is where you have a horizon line involved, and that is kind of like your eye level. So if you were like way down below looking up at stuff, your horizon line will be, they call it like slug's eye view, would be way down here. If you were up in a building kind of looking down, it can also be rather low. It just depends on where your eye level is. If you're kind of up high on a platform, your horizon may be a little higher. So it just depends on your eye level. For the most part, what I want you to think of, though, is what we call the rule of thirds. Think about having that horizon line at the top third of your page or having at the bottom third. You don't want to put it straight in the middle of your design. This is just a basic design way to guide yourself. So make sure it's a little more interesting by putting that horizon line a third, either where I guess you can kind of consider it like you either choose a third sky and 2/3 land, or you choose 1/3 land and 2/3 sky. Okay, that's kind of a rule of thumb. A few things I want you to notice. Okay, so we have that horizon line, and we have what's called a vanishing point, and because it's only 1 point for the whole page, for the whole picture, that's why we call it 1 point perspective. There are other perspectives. There's 2 point, 3 point. There's lots of different kinds of perspectives. There's books on perspective. This is one of the most, it's one of the most important ones to start with. So 1 point. Another thing you'll notice is that things, as they get further into the distance, they get closer and closer and closer together, and they also get smaller. So if we look at the distance between this first post and the second one, and then the next post and the next post, let's not worry about looking at the post. Would you just look at the space between the posts? Can you see how they're getting closer and closer and closer together to where they vanish? Thus the word vanishing point, the point at which everything kind of vanishes. You'll notice sometimes that things will just get junked up in there. What started as a railroad tie very clear in the front will just wind up being a dot in the back. So things will get closer and closer and closer together as they go to the point, and they will get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I want to encourage you to also be thinking about the fact that even though this is a pen and ink drawing, usually things get a little more faint in the back. And that's because there's something called ambient perspective. That means that depending on the day, there can be a lot of moisture in the air, or there can be pollution or things that cause the details to go rather light, and you just can't see them because it's almost like you have a dirty lens by the time you get back in here. There's so much there's so many particles in the air that by the time your eye can even see back there, it's just a little bit cloudy back in here. So you don't have to be that specific. You can be kind of lighter with your pencil and even lighter with your colors when you begin to paint. So okay, so there's that. Let's look at an actual picture. This is, maybe I should lift it. It is an actual picture, and it has no guidelines on it or anything, but I hope you can see there's a massive similarity, real life and then a drawing. See, these railroad lines look like they're triangles, right? And they all go back to that point. Well, here are trolley lines, and they too are triangular as they bend back, even though you and I know that these tracks run completely parallel and straight. If you were to draw them straight, it just would not work. Even if you're standing smack dab in the middle, as you look to the horizon, it's going to bend and create that triangular look. You'll also notice that the roof lines will do the same thing. All those roof lines travel back to the point. They just travel back to the point. Even these trolley line electrical lines go way back to the point. So it's just a grid work, a framework that we use when we draw, especially these kind of tunnel vision city scenes. Another thing to note is that the vertical lines are completely vertical. These side building lines will go straight up and down in 1 point perspective. They do not bend. Only I guess I'd say the horizontal lines along, if you were to picture it being like a tunnel, everything that's along those lines of the tunnel, so the horizontal lines in the sidewalk or in the trolley, this cement work for the trolley, those go horizontal, but they also go up and down. They go side to side and they go down. But if they go along that, they will go to the point. Okay, hope that works. It's almost like an X, it's like a one big X framework, or maybe like the rays of a sun, where it travels as that X, but everything else in between fans. So the lines will go, I'll just line my pencil up, they go wham, 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 wham. See how they fan? They match up to that point. I can fan all the way around, it's matching up to that point. Fan to the roof line to the point. Any of those window lines will go to the point. Here's a line, it goes to the point. Edge of the sidewalk to the point. It just fans all the way along like the rays of a sun. Okay, all the way along they match up, they line up to that point. It's beautiful. Okay, there are also rules that go with indoor. This was a lesson I did I think last year with Visual Basics, but same kind of structure, although my point looks like a spider on the wall. An interior room, it's the same concept, except instead of going completely into the background and vanishing, we block it off with a wall. And so the rules apply. The flooring, it's the same. Couches, all those things will fit within this framework that I'm going to show you. But the way to make an interior room, if you want to do that, is just draw it like you would the city scene, except block off that back wall, and you have yourself a room. So it's just the same. I just want to point that out. There's interior and exterior 1 point perspective, okay? All right, let's begin. I want to remind you that you can stop this video, please stop this video as you're drawing along, all right? So just pause, push pause, and feel free to rewind. I'm going to go as fast as I can because it's already 7 minutes long. So we'll measure. You can eyeball this. I'm fine with that. But for those of you who like to measure, I think it's handy just to shout out some numbers for you. This is a 9. I handed you a 9-inch piece of paper. I'd like to make sure that you structure that paper going landscape. It's side to side, not portrait, which goes up and down. This screen is in portrait. Your drawing hopefully will be in landscape, and it's a little awkward for me to draw because I have to keep sliding it around, but here we go. All right, so you want to use your ruler, and I'm going to see that it's 9 inches. I'm going to make a mark at 3 on one side of my page, and I'm going to make a mark at 3 on the other side. And this is just so that as I match the one mark on one side of the page and the mark on the other side of the page, it makes sure that my ruler is straight and I don't accidentally make it go slanty. And then as you draw anytime with your ruler, flail out your fingers, spread them out so that you anchor that ruler all the way. The pressure stays on that ruler as best you can. Now, this is awkward. I don't know if you've noticed that. Look at me. I'm like, oh, I'm a contortionist. I'm going to turn my paper this way. Even though my drawing is going to be in landscape, I want to make sure that, hold on, I need a little more space here. I want to make sure that my arms are comfortable, so I'm going to hold my ruler. Like I said, I kind of spread my hand out. You don't want to do this little number where you hold it and then start drawing your line, because if you do, let me do it with my eraser, you can press on it and your ruler will pivot where you're holding it. So it's important to grab that habit to develop that habit of keeping your fingers out on your ruler like that. Okay, so I'm going to go very faintly. We talked about pressure. All I need to do is to be able to lightly see it. I don't have to carve it into my paper. Work on pressure. Now, along this horizon line, I'm going to draw my point halfway through. And because this is a 12-inch piece of paper, that means at 6, I'm going to make my vanishing point. Now, your vanishing point should be very small. Don't make a big old dot, just a mark, so you know where it is. That's all you need to do. And let's begin. What we're going to do is we're going to draw our street and we're going to draw the sidewalks to begin with. So I'm going to hold my point with my pencil lead and I'm going to line it up to the corner of my paper over here on the left. And I'm going to draw my first line. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to line it up to the point, line it up to the corner, and draw. Okay? And again, I'm going to go as fast as I can here, so let's start cooking. But I want you to pause. Don't feel like you have to hang on. I mean, this is not a race. You stop, okay? All right, so I am going to go basically 1 inch at the bottom. Oh, let me see so you can see. 1 inch here. I'm going to make rather thin sidewalks. And then 1 inch over here. Now, if you want to eyeball it, that's fine. I'm just giving you a measurement so that you can feel comfortable. But that's about what I'm doing. So I'm going to, just like I did with the corner, I'm going to line it up to my measurement and line that up to the point, draw my line. Same thing on the other side. Point, draw to the 11, draw it down. There's my sidewalk. Sidewalks have curbs. So now we're going to draw this little curb area. And I am only going to do about 1/4 of an inch. You could go ahead and measure it, but it's just another like 1/4 of an inch, or you can kind of eyeball it. We don't want it very thick. So there's my 1/4 of an inch if you want to measure it, or you could kind of guesstimate, that's fine too. Line it up to the point, and draw. Now, we want to draw our sidewalk lines. Now, I don't know if you remember I was saying it earlier in the beginning that things get closer and closer together as they get further and further into the page. And so let's first just put down these flat lines. So we're going to draw a flat line over here, and it's going to get placed over here just by the sheer fact of the ruler is going to stretch across our page. I'll show you how we do that. So our first line, I'm laying my ruler flat, and I'm just going to go up a little bit, not a lot. Draw my flat line here. I'm holding my ruler. Watch. And then I draw my flat line over here. Okay? So they're the same, actually. They're not, they're just the same. Okay, now I'm going to turn my paper so that you can see as I go. Now, it almost, seriously, it doesn't matter whether you do it flat. This is a little more literal way to do it, or we can turn the paper this way. It's going to work. I can get more on the view. But here, let me do it flat first, and then I'll show you how we can turn it this way and still construct it just fine. And it will be more comfortable for our hand, actually. But let me do it flat first. So I did 1 flat sidewalk. I'm going to do the next section of sidewalk. And again, it's matching on both sides. I just draw my line over here and draw my line over here. And the distance between these two is 1 inch. So I did 1 inch from this part to this part, if you really, really want to know. Okay. Now, I'm going to go up and down here because the curb is a right-angled unit. So I'm going straight up and down like that. Let me do that on both sides. And we can go all the way back into the background. Now, let me explain this with this. Equal distance perspective. You want to make sure that these don't look like the person that laid down the sidewalk has like spatial issues. You want to make sure that it looks like it gets small, that they're uniform, even though they get smaller into the distance. So I showed you that picture of railroad tracks, or these are all the same as the sidewalk lines. There's just more of them. And even these, let's turn the paper, and I think you could see that these work kind of like the sidewalk lines would work. If they were lines, it's just a nicer, not as cluttered version of the same thing. So we've drawn a sidewalk line. We went further back into our page. We drew a sidewalk line. And now what we want to think about is closing this space up a little bit at a time until it goes into dots in the back. So that's why I'm saying it's not going to matter whether we keep our paper flat or whether we turn it up, vertically. We're going to structure it the same. Now there's a way you can go ahead and do this by measuring. And that is, we're not going to do it, but I'm just showing it to you. You draw your line to begin with. You find the half of the line. You draw it into the back. Now what you can do is you draw the next post, and then where that line intersects, you will line your ruler up, and you'll say, okay, I'll draw over here. Where it intersects into half, that's where the base of the next unit would go. And then you start at the top of that line, you find half, and that will tell you where the base of the next line will go. I could do this one. I would see where it would go to half and draw, and my base for my next post would go right here. So there is a way to measure it through. For this, just because it's our first round at it, I am going to have you just do this where you say, okay, it's about that far, and you could even kind of measure from here to here and see how distance it is and just enclose it a little bit more. Actually, what we could do is just kind of go straight out. Oh, let's do that. That's another way to do it. Okay. Do you see how where I ended here, I start to the next thing? We could just go to the next guy. Yeah, let's do that. That works. Okay. Let me try it again, folks. Turn your paper this way. Make sure your ruler works with your handedness. So you can flip it if you're left-handed. I'm right-handed. So I have the bar. I found out where it hit the curb, right? Now I use my ruler to find out where it's going to hit this line, and then I draw it down here. I'm going to line it up, and I have it here, down here. I already did it. Let me find the next line. So I'm going to start at the bottom here. I'm going to use my ruler flat and find out where it hits this outer line. Turn it. Draw my line over here. Make sure it's straight. Draw my line over here. I have the bottom of this line. I'm going to see where it, and again, I'm making sure this is perpendicular, right? This looks like a complete plus sign. This line goes this way. I'm not slanty is what I mean. I'm like a plus sign. So I'm looking at the bottom, and I'm going to find out where it hits, and that's where my next line will be. Boy, I hope you get this. Keep watching, see if you can pick up the pattern, okay? Bottom of my line, make my ruler flat, look where it hits here. I didn't draw it, right? I don't draw that line. I just find out an eyeball, where does it hit? And I hold my pencil there, and then I know where my next line is. Find the bottom. And see, can you see how this is getting, this was kind of wide here. It's getting a little bit closer and closer and closer. Okay, bottom of my line. Find out, make it perpendicular. Don't draw the line, just find where it hits. Grab it, draw it here, draw it here. And by doing this, I'm actually using this principle without drawing all those lines, okay? Find out the bottom of the line. Draw it across. Not draw it, I'm sorry. Eyeball it. Find it where it went. The ruler. Draw it down. There we go. There. And you can do this all the way into the sunset. Now, I talked about ambient perspective. Remember, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter as you get into the background because there's actually just flat out more air particles between your face and that vanishing point. So don't make these super dark. You can start getting them a little more faint. Whoa. And then you can just like mark that one awry. Okay, erase a little bit. Well, I need to push on. It's maybe I'll shade it later. We talked about turning things into a tuba. That might need to be a place where I park a car later. Okay, now it's getting a little ridiculous, right? So I'm going to just start making little dots and call it good. Okay, now I've done that. We want to make the curb. So because this is a right angle curb, I'm going to use vertical lines here. Please use your ruler. But once they get to dots, or maybe they completely disappear in here, you don't even have to indicate them, okay? It's just once they start showing up that you really have to do something. See, I just made a dot, a dot. I don't have to do anything there. And then I'll go down the other way. And these are really small little details. But they make a big difference when you get these right. So notice my ruler is straight up and down, and that's going to make that right angle of a curb. And then I'm done, okay? Now let's build buildings. We're going to take the width of our ruler, and you see where your horizon line is? I want your line to go above the horizon line. So I'm going to take the width of my ruler, I'm going to line it up to my page, and these are kind of just framework, peripheral vision buildings. These are not going to be really important to our drawing, but they're just going to start us off, okay? So I made a line. I've left some space at the top, but it is above this line. So somewhere in here, if you really want a measurement, because you're like, I just want to do it right, how about 7 inches? 6 to 7 inches, okay? How about that? Something like that, all right? Now, I'm going to take the top of the line. I'm going to make sure that it lines up with my point. And then I'm not going to draw that guideline. I'm only going to draw the part I need, which is this part. I need the roof. Do the same on the other side. I'm going to line up my ruler to the edge of my paper. And again, I'm so okay with you eyeballing it. I just need it to go over the horizon line and under the top of the paper. So if you really need a measurement, again, go about 6 to 7 inches. Start, and then I'm going to line up the point with my building. I'm going to hold my ruler. All right, spread my fingers and draw my roof. Okay, there's my first 2 little building outlines, okay? I'm going to do the next building. Let's make the next building don't make the next building like the whole entire street wide, okay? Let's go about 2 inches, okay? 2 inches in width, something like that. I'm going to hold my ruler down, make sure my ruler's straight up and down. I'm going to make sure it's over the horizon line. Oh, I almost made a classic blunder. Okay, so I'm going to go about 2 inches, but let's do this. This will be much better. Let's start at the line of the building that it's next to, okay? This will avoid a very important mistake. So we're going to start with this line of the building. I'm going to match my ruler up to that side of the building, and I'm going to go a little bit taller. And then I'm going to line this part to the point. I'm going to go about 2 inches like that, and then I'm going to go down straight. Because I already made that mark, I'm going to erase my mark. Okay, the reason I did this, here, let me just finish the building. Okay, you want this part of the building to go flat off the side of your page. Okay, that's the thickness of the building. And this part of the building is actually facing us head on. So the buildings, we're seeing this part of the building, and so this face is this part, and this face is this part. So it's almost like a box. You were able to see, you're actually seeing the face of the box, except that it's covered by this side building, but that's the face of the box, and this is the side of the box. And the side of the box has to report to the point, but the face of the box sits squarely on, like just a rectangle. So that's why that part needs to be that way. All right, let me show you the classic blunder. The classic blunder, and I've seen this again and again and again, is the fact that people they'll draw a building and it looks pretty good. Then they'll go to the next building, and what they'll forget to do is they'll forget that this building sits next to a neighboring building, right? But they'll forget that the foot of the building is very important to pay attention to, and so when they go up into the sky, they forget this part of the building. So let me show you how that would work. They would do a number like this. So here, and this is a fast rendition. So here's that side of the building. They go ahead, they draw the next part of the building. They make sure it goes to the point. The classic blunder is, and then they go beyond the building and they put it there. So what they've done is they've contorted the face of the building. It's almost like they're cards or pieces of paper. So the face of the building and this face of the building, this face like slides into the other building. when in fact this building has to end here because it's sitting next to this neighbor. So then this would go flat and then down, and now it's fine. Anyway, the way to avoid this problem, because you don't want it, you want it to look like boxes next to each other, not playing cards. Okay? So it's this corner that gets people every time they move it over too far and they make it dive down in here so that it does that little number. So it almost looks, again, it almost looks like pieces of paper stacked up. See how there's no depth in here, and it almost looks like the building got contorted. Okay, so the way to avoid that is to just grab, to pay attention to the closest line, not the one that's furthest out. You'll avoid this mistake altogether if you do that. So I'll go a little bit taller. I'll go to the point. I'll draw the face of the building. I will go down, and then I'll work on this back part. And you can, if you want, just go to the back of the other building if it's taller, or if you want, you can go ahead and just make that boxy straight angle back here. That works too. Okay, but it has to be, it's a rectangle. It's the top of the rectangle right there. All right, let's do the other side. Remember, we're going to start on the line that we already have, and we're going to go up, go to the point. Please pause the video when you need to. Don't let me just scoot on through and go down straight. Figure out the depth of the building. There you go. Now I'm going to show you a trick I think is kind of fun. Now, I've been showing you where they share that line, right? Let's have it offset a little bit. Let's leave a little bit of space. Not much. This is just one of those little itty-bitty alleyways that only the mice and the garbage can get through to, okay? So I'm going to make my own new line. I'm not sharing this line. I'm going to leave a little bit of space. This adds character to your city scene. I'm going as far as I want, and then down, like that. Now, remember how the tops had to be square? So we'll make that top square, but I want to show you what happens to the bottom. The bottom also needs to be square, and this is a very important little detail that if you put this in, it just adds so much. That little, there, it's going to make your drawing just look so much really, really good. It actually, your eye does notice these little things, so it's nice to put them in. All right, let's try that over here. So we're not going to share the line anymore because we you've rocked that. Let's move on. We're going to do the line closest to us, but here, let's make sure that, boy, this ruler has had a few X-Acto knife run-ins. Okay. All the way down, but I'm not sharing the line. I'm making a brand new one. I'm lining it to the point. Now, keep in mind, these buildings are going to have to get smaller and smaller, right? You don't want to make a massive building in here because that's just going to look weird. So kind of make the faces of these buildings just a little bit smaller like we did, a little bit like we did here with these sidewalk lines. Okay. So then again, we'll go back. These are almost the same height, so I'm going to make this one more narrow. And then it's got that squareness. We're going to do the squareness down here too. And that little detail, that little bit of information is just so important. It really helps it pop. Okay, so anyway, we don't have to do that for everyone, but I just thought it was a nice little detail I wanted to make sure I showed you. So I'll rip through these buildings. Once you start getting kind of good at them, you'll notice that it, to the point, down, back. Okay, I'm going to make this one shorter, but see where my horizon line is? If you were to build a building down here, you would have to show the roof line. So just be sure you don't do that. Now, with this one, I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is find somewhere along this building that I want to make it go to the point, draw my roof line, draw it down. Maybe I'll make another one that's short. Draw the roof line, draw it down. Now the next one, let's say it's taller. So I'll go up, share that line to the point, draw it down, and make sure I draw the back of the building. I'm going to go a little taller, draw to the point, draw it down, straight up and down, draw the roof line. Now, these get ridiculous. So let's wait a minute right there. Let's finish this side of the straight. These get bizarro. To the roof line, straight down. I'm just going to go shorter. I'm going to go taller now, so I'm going to draw the line closest to me, go up to the point, draw my roof line, go straight down, draw the back. So it's kind of the same formula for each building as you go in the back. Now, once you get into here, they start kind of getting crowded, just like the sidewalk lines got crowded. So these, you can kind of just wing it. What you do is, I'm going to draw the line closest to me, and then you can sort of just, yeah, it gets so extreme. So you can just kind of make teeny little lines that go down. You can even stack them. Well, let's see. Just depends on how crowded it gets, but it gets very extreme. These building lines just get tall. And then, you know, I mean, you can leave it like a tunnel, or you can even just kind of put just little lines in there to just kind of block it out and make it darker. No one's going to know. Okay. So those are your outlines. That is what we're going to do for this first round. Next week, we'll work on all the buildings, the windows and the doors, and I'll show you all that. But I really want to make sure you have these outlines right. Go ahead if you want to. You can leave that horizon line in. That might be helpful when we go ahead and we do the windows. It is helpful because we talked about how it fans out. There is a point where all of a sudden it's flat and you're like, wait, I thought you said that things curve up or curve down when they're on the side of a building. Well, they do, but at one point they finally go flat, and that's at the horizon. So it's kind of nice to say, oh yeah, I'm not making it up. This is just that part at which it's lined up with the horizon. So this is week 1. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions.